It's time to kiss your opponents goodbye. Find out what's going on as I hereby summon all my imps to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So we got a new card this week, and that card happens to be White Widow. White Widow is a Russian super spy who was forged to be an exemplary Black Widow in the Red Room Academy. She was obsessed with the Black Widow and has undergone intense training to surpass her idol. However, once she found out that the Black Widow program was only being used to make pawns for whoever the highest bidder was, and that there was no glory or heroism, she abandoned it and now walks her own path. White Widow eventually resumed her activities as a spy, but now she works for S.H.I.E.L.D. While dozens of others have followed this path, the transition from villain to heroes is not always a smooth process, and it certainly was not for her. After having gone through the torturous training as Black Widow, she started out by leading some of the most notorious criminal organizations in all of Marvel Universe before deciding to change her own destiny. White Widow was a member of the Red Room who had ways to recover their prominent agents via cloning. Several clones of her were made by the Red Room as part of a plan to bring back their best agent to their fold. The saddest part is the Red Room has a way of putting memories into these clones that is so good that to this day she is unsure of her own origin, and some days worries she is only a clone. White Widow, having spent most of her life in the Red Room, is a cynical person with a very sarcastic, deadpan sense of humor. She has a bit of a bent moral compass to boot. Despite this, though, she does have a strong sense of right and wrong. She felt abandoned by her birth family and thus has a very strained relationship with her adopted parents and older sister. Despite this, though, she still cares very much for her adopted family and loves them. White Widow has no superpowers, but do not let that fool you, as she is extensively trained in espionage and various forms of armed and unarmed combat. She is a master martial artist with peak human conditioning and is highly intelligent technician with Olympic-level gymnasts. She is also equipped with her own special gauntlets, which are similar to the original Black Widows. However, they are designed to fire an incapacitating energy beam, and not only just one round. She calls this the Widow's Kiss. White Widow started out as the most prominent candidate from the Red Room Academy, even outmatching the marks of the renowned Black Widow. She was given a gauntlet that could fire an incapacitating energy beam. However, now she fights for good. This is represented in Marvel Snap as when she shows up, she will fire the Widow's Kiss into your opponent's side, incapacitating him. But with enough effort, a bad effect can be overcome. Okay, so in Marvel Snap, she actually is considered two different cards. So there are two different cards that make up the White Widow. The first part is actually the White Widow, which is a 2 energy, 2 cost card that has on reveal, add a Widow's Kiss to your opponent's side on this side of the location. So whenever you play the White Widow, it'll go into your opponent's side and give it the Widow's Kiss. Now the Widow's Kiss is a 0 energy, 0 cost card with the ongoing effect that it has -4 power. So when you play it onto a lane that's got nothing into it, it'll actually be a 0 -4. And if that lane gets filled, it'll take off the effect, becoming a 0/0 again. Assuming that nothing else changes it, In Marvel Snap, my rating for this card, I feel it is a 4-star rating, almost a 5-star rating to be honest. And the closest card that comes to it happens to be the Wizard. And the reason I use the Wizard is back in the day, before Wizard got nerfed, Wizard used to be a 2/5 that lost -3 power when the lane was filled. This is basically a 2/6 that loses -4 power when the lane is filled. So this is basically old-fashioned Wizard before it got nerfed. Even if the bite, I should say kiss, stone, let's call it kiss, gets completely shut off, it's still basically a 2/2. So even on the worst of days, you're looking at basically the equivalent of Goose, where it's a 2/2 that for no other reason annoys your opponent to no end. Now, if you were to look at Debris here, if Debris got knocked down one level and became a 2/2 herself, but only threw one rock in the lane that she was in, you'd still consider that a good card. And that's basically what you're looking at when you're looking at White Widow. It's basically throwing a rock into your opponent's lane that might have an upside. There's also an old-fashioned strategy that used to exist in the game, where on turn 1 you would play the Hood. And back when Viper existed as a 2/4, you'd do the Viper on 2/4 and knock over the Hood. So basically you're getting the combination of Viper Hood in one card without having to actually find the combination. Whenever you take two cards and combine them into one bigger card, it's a great effect. There are some cards that it works well with, but the thing that you also got to look at is stuff like, this is an early game Green Goblin. Any location like the Space Throne or Sinister, you can play this down onto and just knock out a game. Win that location just early on and get that quick win in here. You don't always have to play this in an Nihilist deck. Now, that is its normal home, but there are times when you can just play it on 2 and finish it up by playing 3 on Storm, and just 2 with that and 3 with Storm is pretty nasty and might just win you the lane alone. Now, if you do want to finish that off with something nasty, most likely they can't win that lane because they're low because of Storm and the White Widow and the Bite. You basically put 2 and then another 2 and then another 4 on top of that. So you're talking about 8 points that they got to get down by turn basically 3, so you can finish it off with Crossbones on a lot of day. And if you want to make sure that you win the lane, you can just throw a Stegon in there. It's also nice if you put it down early game and they don't touch it, and then right on the last turn 6, you just take the Stegon and knock over something and hope it's not the stone. Or if you want to use Cannonball and make sure it's not the stone to really make that switch happen. There's also a whole idea of playing Mojo into the same lane, so if they do fill the lane, they get the -4 back, but they're also giving your Mojo 6 power. So you fill the lane, they fill the lane, and because of that fact, they lost the -4, but they gave the Mojo -6, so you actually have to kind of do the math in your head. Also, a nasty little card for stuff like Angela or Hope Summers, where Angela wants to have as many spots open, and you basically throw a rock into Angela so that it has one less spot that it gets to fill. This can also work with stuff like Wong and stuff like Living Tribunal, where it's looking for that 4th slot, and having one rock in there can really mess up its calculations, even though it's just a rock at that point. It can get messed up. Now, it does fail to stuff like Carnage and Venom and cards like that, and it even falls sometimes to other cards too. But the other thing that you might be able to set up, which is kind of funny, is if you're playing High Evolutionary with this, you can put down the Bite, and then you can put down a High Evolutionary Cyclops in the range if you're playing the Toxic version, and just start knocking out and putting the negative on it. So even if it gets completely filled up, it's still going to have the negative points on it. Because it turned off the effect of it, but it doesn't turn off any more effects that happen to it. So there are ways that you might be able to buff out of it with stuff like Ironheart and stuff like that. There's also a weird version that's been discussed a little about, where on turn 1 you play like a Nebula, and then on turn 2 in a different lane you play the Widow's Bite, and then turn 3 you play on a different lane Jean Grey. And even if they're playing a bounce deck, it's really hard to get all 3 lanes filled. And basically all you do is you put like the Angela in your deck, and you put the Kitty in your deck, and you just keep bouncing on the Jean Grey, making the Jean Grey get stuff, making the Angela get stuff, and basically there's just not enough turns and not enough moves to get everything filled, and you might just win a lane that way. You can also stop it with like something like Professor X near the end. So I don't think it has to go in the Annihilus deck. It's good in the Annihilus deck, but I'd be shocked and surprised if you don't see it in some other decks just floating around as nothing more than just play here or I win the lane. You almost are treating it like a quasi pseudo Green Goblin, where when you see Green Goblin sometimes come down on 3, you're like, oh, I'm not touching that lane. I don't care. I'm just gonna let them have that lane. For the other cards that we have this particular week, not too bad of cards. Snowguard's taken a little bit of a hit. She's had a rough time, but there's a lot that people don't realize how good the Hawk is, and it kind of gets pigeonholed into the Loki version of this, where most people are using this as card generation for the Loki version, without realizing that basically Snowguard is almost like a Jeff to a certain degree. Maybe somewhere in the future they'll bring Snowguard back down. The Bear's not as great. And there's very few locations that aren't reciprocal. There's very few locations that you care about, but it has some use. Now, on the other hand, Nico Momoro. Oh, Nico Momoro is one of those cards where there is no replacement for Nico Momoro. In every single deck that you can think of where Nico Momoro is there is no replacement. Having 7 different things be attached to one card makes this card so powerful, and at the same time so punishing sometimes and so hard to judge. It's a good card. It makes certain decks work. It makes certain decks run. It creates certain decks by just existing. But you have to be pretty decently good with your collection. Now, this could even go into a new collection, because every single solitary time you get this spell, the Destroy spell, it is just so winning, because it's just going to take down your deck, bring down your deck. So there's not really a bad hit on this week. And if you don't have Nico, I go for her. If you don't have Snowguard, you might. But Snowguard, I think, should just be brought down to Series 3 sooner or later. Not even sure if it's still Series 5. No, it got brought to Series 4, so you can buy that one with tokens if you need it. So probably the worst hit in here might be the Snowguard only because it is Series 4 now. I, on the other hand, will spin on the box because I do this for content, so let's find out what's in the box. What's in the box? Let's all find what's in the box. Box says... Oh, yeah. That's a Nico Momoro for sure. Alright, I'm going to try to find some deck to play with Nico Momoro. It might just go into a regular deck, but I'm going to try to actually make a deck that's focused on her for this Friday. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, remember, play for fun.